We say, oh, it's horrible. Everything is bad here. The worst history. We didn't win the Great Patriotic War. Remember, we didn't win the Great Patriotic War, but they call it World War II. And all we have to do is repent and love America. I felt so hurt. And then Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin came. And after Putin came, it stopped being like that. Because he is a normal person with values, not just interests, but with values that he believes in and has been defending for 25 years. Margarita Simonyan has managed to sink even lower, and she came out with pathetic statements, more like trying to please Russia's bloody leader. More than anything reasonable. But when have Russians ever been reasonable? That's what we discussed today. Our president is modest, but I still want to point it out. Simonyan told us how difficult and bad life was for her and other citizens of the Federation before Putin's rule. According to the repulsive propagandist, life was like this. They ask in interviews and in private. We communicate much less now, but still. Can you explain? The English are puzzled. Why do you support Putin so much? Why do you? I keep trying to explain what life in Russia was like before Putin. I mean, we remember it. I am trying to explain, simply, not with political science, not with complicated terms, not with economic figures, but simply what it was like for the young girl I was when Vladimir Vladimirovich came to power. This is how it was. When you saved for a year from side jobs because you had to study and still needed extra money. I taught English and gave private lessons while still studying. I sold sneakers at the flea market, and a teacher from my school was also selling goods she brought from Poland as a shuttle trader. Neither the teacher nor the student could survive. From these side jobs, you save up for a year because your only winter shoes have worn out, so that by the next winter, you can go to a second-hand shop where they sell free of charge, sent to us as humanitarian aid, other people's worn clothes and stomped shoes. And you save up for a year to buy this one pair of stomped shoes so that you have something to walk in during the winter. It was real. It's not something you read in a book or see in a movie. So I remember it was our life. I remember this horrible isolation. Does everyone remember the Caucasus? Because there was war. Well, it was. It happened everywhere. I don't know any unaffected regions. If it was in my native Krasnodar Krai, Kuban, Krasnodar Krai, then Vladimir Vladimirovich came and it was over. Because a normal person came with values, not just interests like theirs, with values he believes in and has been defending for 25 years. Let us now look at how the Russians are living now when Putin has been in charge of the Federation for so many years. And here is the greatness of Russia in all its glory. That's the kind of hospital we have here. Where is the pediatrician? There are buckets everywhere. Nice. But of course, how would Simonyan know about it? She, along with other Putin supporters, earns enough to live a good life because bloody rubles don't smell. Now Margarita, who used to sell sneakers to buy new clothes, can buy Cadillacs and service them with budget funds. Does she know 90% of the country still lives like this? They can't afford to buy another pair of clothes for the season. They barely get by, living in neglected slums, forgotten by both Putin and God. It's hard, but we're used to it. Can't we heat the stove? Bring firewood or water? Will you ever get gas? First of all, these houses are so bad. Who knows what could happen? I read that someone died in a fire. Yeah, there was one here in this house. It was an old woman who heated the stove and was sitting right here by it. Something caught fire on the stove and it went all over the house. They couldn't do anything because the house was locked. Just like that, no one knew she had burned until later. So it took days to find out about her? Yes, that's how it is here. Of course, this doesn't concern Putin at all. Together with the propagandists, they live in their own reality, far from the one millions of citizens face daily. Driven to total poverty. And now it's the cherry on the cake. Do you know what their deputies are telling Russians at this time? That's just beyond belief. They claim that living for oneself and taking care of oneself in Russia is a horrible concept. What do you think? As long as you live once, you should live for yourself and owe no one anything. Well, of course, this concept is not only wrong, it is harmful. We once had a childlessness tax in this country. If we have 30 million such people, I propose to radically solve the issue, that is, to introduce a tax on childlessness of about 20% of wages. Exactly. If we want to solve this issue, if we want to go downhill, let's do nothing and say that everything is fine and everything will be solved. This person, by the way, is a businessman, an ex-deputy, Viktor Taranin. He is only concerned about the demographic crisis in Russia, not about people barely making ends meet. Instead of talking about the people and their well-being, ensuring they have children, he proposes to impose a tax on childlessness, which will affect 30 million men who do not want to get married. Are you married? How old are you? Why don't you get married? Yes, you. What's wrong? You're right. Yes. The fact that they live in Russia, have received education and treatment here, and then they need diamonds, need to go to Dubai, and then they get nothing. No family, and you have no future. Your whole bloodline and surname will be forgotten. In the poorer areas of Russia, young families should focus on the birth of children. Not on chasing material luxuries like diamonds and trips to Dubai. Right? They need to breed cannon fodder. I agree, because the Russians haven't lived normally and shouldn't start. It's better for them to breed their poverty at home. Don't spread their disease around the world. We, Russia, have fully recovered from the unpleasant outcome of the Cold War, which resulted in the collapse of the Soviet Union. Yes, we've come a long way. Big challenges, we've had problems. I am firmly convinced that after the so-called special military operation, which will end in our victory, I think that no one else will have any desire to fight with Russia. Because if you listen to what comes out of their TV, both those who produce the television content and those who consume it regularly are incurably sick, because sane people wouldn't spout such nonsense. The tragedy of humanity before World War II, including World War II, were tragedies unleashed precisely by Europeans. The instincts of the ruling class in Europe are now clearly manifested in what is happening in Ukraine, in the war that the West has unleashed against Russia, with the hands of the so-called Kyiv regime and the bodies of the so-called regime and the bodies of Ukrainian citizens. If we remember about nuclear weapons and show unambiguous political will to bring this bright idea to the Europeans, the situation changes radically. When the possibility of using weapons of mass destruction is taken into account, they shouldn't think it won't happen. They shouldn't stay aside. It's a strategy focused on Europe. In this case, the balance is not in their favor. With or without the US, it's a 100% collapse for Europe. What do you think? Comment below. Next, I'll show you Kiev's verbal rubbish again. In one show, he goes crazy over Europeans supporting Ukraine. German Foreign Affairs Minister Annalena Baerbock visited Kyiv yesterday on an unannounced visit. This is her 9th trip to Ukraine as foreign minister since the beginning of the Russian full-scale invasion. The Lithuanian Foreign Minister Kęstutis arrived in Kyiv. The mouths of bunker Putin are mad again. If you think about nuclear weapons and show absolute political will to bring this bright idea to the Europeans, the situation changes. Because many things change when the possibility of using weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, is taken into account. They shouldn't think they can stay aside. It's a strategy focused on Europe. In this case, the balance is not in their favor. With or without the US, it's 100% collapse for Europe. I think it's important to get the simple idea to their brains in time, that they will be destroyed. It's not about money or resources. They'll face problems and be destroyed physically. Then the situation may change to a great extent, including in people's minds, because the ideology that could be spoken about during World War II, in that ready-made form, that machine, no longer exists. They try to create it, but there are many internal problems. I don't think history can, as a tracing paper, repeat itself. But nevertheless, in the end, we invented nuclear weapons. We all invented them together and put them in service. Why? So that such people with their, let's say, delusional ideas, such as the revival of neo-Nazism and so on, would not be tempted to fight a big war with Russia. But Mikhail resurfaced from the depths in another show. He likes not just sitting on 2 chairs at once, but also hopping between all the Kremlin's shows, following Putin's manual. It is necessary either to convince Trump in some way of the change of power in Ukraine and to prevent the possibility of a backward link between the states in Europe in this direction, or to work out a radical solution to the Ukrainian issue. Unfortunately, I don't see any other options. As far as Europe is concerned, in case of a big war with Russia, it will take place on the territory of Europe with the use of nuclear weapons. That's all. In this situation, if the Americans are out, that is, out of this situation, then Europe loses unambiguously. And I will only remind you that despite the Russians and whatever happens in the international political arena, let's continue to support our defense forces. Ukraine was, is, and will be. We in Ukraine will not be theirs. Just a reminder, it's me, Inna Nabok. Take care of yourself and Ukraine. Who's knocking from the depths again? Stay tuned.